Today's video is sponsored by our good friends at Famous Faces and Funnies, located in Melbourne, Florida. Check out their Facebook live auctions on great deals on back issues and comics. Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Codename GIJoe. Hi, I'm your presenter, Shabu Are You. Today we're going to actually do something cool, unique, and I want to give this a try for the first time. My regulars know that since 2015, the bread and butter of this channel has been recapping the IDW run of G.I. Joe. And in turn, we go back to the Marvel run often and kind of do cross-references and see how the story has moved along. Of course, with the issue number 300, putting kind of like a pause on G.I. Joe right now, I wanted to do something that I've always wanted to do, and that's take a look at some other iconic GenX era franchises comic series. And today we're going to start off with something that's near and dear to my heart, and that would be Transformers issue number 1. Now, I will admit that unlike the G.I. Joe Marvel run, I'm not very up to date with the Transformers. I've always been like a pick a issue here and there type of guy. It wasn't like a regular thing that I did because I was more invested in the Sunbow series and the toys. So the comics often took a backseat. And then as the years has gone by, Transformers is such a big, vast clusterfuck, but it's just kind of tough to dive into Transformers. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for, like, maybe there's a lot of other fellow Gen Xers like me. But right off the bat, issue number 1 is so zany that it deserves this. And I know there's Transformer comic YouTubers, and I don't want to step on their toes because I highly recommend going and watching their channel. But this is just a fun dive into this iconic franchise. Now, for us 80s kids, Gen Xers, it starts like there's like a whole kind of tree, and why our generation is kind of the generation that started freaking everything. I'm sorry, millennials and Gen Z or whatever the hell, but the fact is all the good shit came during our time. So it all started, of course, with Star Wars. I mean, that was the game changer. Us getting Kenner figures from our Christmas, birthdays, we all lived for Star Wars. And to this day, I mean, even though Star Wars has taken, a nosedive now, it's become corporate run by Disney, but at the same time, it's like you can't help it. Like, you just gravitate to it. And then from Star Wars, things kind of branch out. You got G.I. Joe, obviously, and you have Masters of the Universe, and I'm going to throw Voltron in too, because Voltron is up there as well, and of course Transformers. So it starts off with Star Wars, and then it branches out to those 4 iconic franchises. So I think this is a good opportunity because, the fun, like I said, the issue number 1 is so zany that it deserves a read-through like we did with the G.I. Joe series. So without further ado, let's take a look at Transformers number 1. Now, what's cool is that IDW has done the same service that it did with G.I. Joe in reprinting such iconic issues. Like IDW had one-shots, so you get issue number 21, and then like some other, like issue 21.B, and then you would get like, I guess, issue 26 and 27, the backstory of Storm Shadow. So they applied that same thing over to the Transformers. And this is the first one-shot of Transformers with a beautiful cover that I could not resist. I mean, you got the toys on the comics. So this is definitely going to get graded, even though I have issue 1 already graded. But I think these two look great together. So essentially, it's a carbon copy, once you get past the cover, of reprint of issue number 1. So let's take a recap and let's take a look at issue number 1 of Transformers. All right, so while we look at this IDW cover that I just mentioned, there's two important things to note that brought us to this point of the creation of Transformers issue number 1. A Tokyo toy store in which a Hasbro representative went over and saw, the different lines of Japanese toy makers, whether Bandai, Takara, and also the success of GIJoe issue number 1 2 years earlier that brought us to Transformers issue number 1. I'm basically condensing the big overall story to make it a little bit easier. The other thing is that originally this was supposed to be a 4-part miniseries, but because of the success, and actually issue number 1 was so successful, there was 3 more printings of it. And you gotta look at the bottom. You see on this one, there's a barcode. So that is a newsstand edition first print. And then if you see another copy with a just regular Spider-Man on the corner, that's a first print. And the black Spider-Man would be a second and third print. So always look at that bottom corner to see. And actually, when you open the original one, in the bottom, you'll see if it's a first, second, or third printing. So as we look at all those involved with this issue 1, of course, Ralph Macchio is the script writer, but it was actually a collective effort with Jim Shooter and Bob Budiansky. See, that's the difference. And I despite Transformers' success, they didn't have a Larry Hama to where the series is still ongoing as it is with G.I. Joe. There was several different writers, several different artists, and it was just a kind of a mess. And despite its success, that was the limitation of Transformers, is that it wasn't just one person like Larry Hama. Alrighty, so let's get started with this recap. And just like the Sunbow show, our story starts in the past with a planet called Cybertron circling a far-off star / sun. A planet that is inorganic, mechanical, probably Death Star inspired. And just to pause for a minute, how did this mechanical planet, what was the genesis of this planet? It just didn't spontaneously pop up, right? So let's just play dumb for a second. We also learned that Autobots wasn't initially a faction, but a term similar to humans. So it was all inhabitants were Autobots, and they're all are going about their lives looking for peace and prosperity. Enter Megatron. Oh, Megatron wasn't about this peace crap and bullshit. He was about power and obedience. So we are to gather the Decepticons were initially Autobots but broke free and going along with Megatron's ideals. So Megatron had been planning and preparing for centuries, recruiting and converting disdained Autobots / Transformers to his plan of uprising. We learned it was during this time that Megatron and his faction, who began referring to themselves as Decepticons, discovered the art of transforming into alt modes. And with that, they began their assault on the Autobots. Despite being outnumbered 3-1, the Decepticons were destroying the Autobots, and battles were one-sided. The Autobots were not built for war. However, as the centuries went on, they too learned the art of transforming and began adopting alt modes. The Autobots were losing and losing bad until an Autobot appeared from nowhere. This Autobot was none other than Optimus Prime. Now let's take a minute and pause right here. There was actually a Sunbow episode called War Dawn where the Aerobots go back in time and they discover who Optimus Prime really is. And he was originally known as an Autobot named Orion Pax. So when you read this issue, go back and watch that particular episode of the Sunbow series to get a better picture and understanding of what went on in the early Cybertronian War. The other thing, as we're going through these comic book, is I noted that Ravage, the dog or the cat cassette player and sound waves, has a more prominent role in the comic book. He actually talks where he never did in the Sunbow series. So I found that to be quite fascinating. He actually serves as Megatron's senior advisor of all roles. So he has a really prominent role in the comic book, especially in this issue number 1. The arrival of Optimus Prime really tilted the whole scale of this war, and soon the Autobots were now making headway and properly defending themselves. But a growing problem was coming. Unlike the Sunbow series, where it was the limitation of resources, while that is present in the comics, the major reason is that Cybertron, because of the war, was thrown off its orbit. Again, I don't understand the science, being someone that has taken physics, I don't understand that, but it's gone off its axis and heading towards a asteroid field. So with this problem lurking, I guess the Autobots talk to, I believe it's Alpha Trion, even though he's not named. So all the elders kind of talk to Optimus Prime, has decided that this is a more pressing danger. So they built the Ark for the purposes of destroying or blasting their way through the asteroid field. I mean, that was why they were leaving Cybertron. So Ravage, not Laserbeak, actually was spying during this meeting and reports back to Megatron what the Autobots are up to and advises Megatron to, hey, they're going to be weak and vulnerable. Now is our time to end this war. So with that, the Autobots set off to destroy this, blow their way through this asteroid field. Now again, it's different from the Sunbow series, totally. So the reasoning for the Autobots boarding the Ark is different between the comic and cartoon. However, as you can see, they did incorporate that element into the TV show as an unexpected event that occurred along the way. In the cartoon, they left Cybertron to look for energy/resources, but they never gave a particular destination. Now, the last time I checked, space is vast. You get the impression they're doing something similar, like making a late night run to 7-Eleven for milk or something. Optimus Prime and the Autobots have successfully saved Cybertron from the asteroid bombardment, but they have little time to celebrate as Megatron and his Decepticons take full advantage of the exhausted Autobots and begin their assault on the Ark. As expected, the affair is completely one-sided. Prowl alerts Optimus that at the current rate, the Autobots have 5 minutes until total annihilation. With that, Optimus Prime makes everyone aware that he had anticipated this move, and his counter is to send the Ark on a suicide run, destroying everyone on board. Cybertron will ultimately be safe from Megatron and Decepticons. It is a heroic and selfless move. Alrighty, so let's pause here for a second. Now, if you look at this panel, Earth is behind Optimus after they successfully cleared the asteroids. Now, isn't the distance between Earth and Cybertron supposed to be 4 light years away? And yes, if you're wondering, light years is an actual unit of measure. So light zips through interstellar space at about 186k miles per second and approximately 6 trillion miles per year. So when you look at images from the Hubble and this other new telescope, it's actually looking into the past. So that's where you could see stars exploding or being born. Those are things that happened a long time ago, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. The other thing is that we actually have 2 asteroid belts in our solar system. The one we all remember from our elementary school between Mars and Jupiter. But did you know that there's another one that's actually behind Neptune and Pluto? So Optimus planned and selected the 3rd planet in this solar system as his impact zone final destination. Now, ignore the how or any other logical questions how he came to this decision and just go with it at this point. The Ark plummets and slams into the side of a volcano. All goes silent. Everyone is presumed DOI, dead on impact. Now you could tell that they kind of took that theory that a meteor came and wiped off the dinosaurs. I see how they incorporated that into the storyline. So anyway, 4 million years passes by. The volcano becomes active again, metaphorically coming to life and serving as a catalyst for the Transformers to also come back to life. The eruption knocked the advanced tech that Optimus was so determined to not allow Megatron to get his hands on. This tech was a rapid change of a Transformer's alt mode in accordance to their surroundings. So the Transformers, a mechanical being laid inoperative for 4 million years. Now, anyone who owns a classic car or a collectible car knows that despite it being stored away, you still have to start it up and go for a little drive once a month just to keep everything in top order. It's not good to let a mechanical item sit unused. Now, over on the Sunbow series, what was shown pretty lines up with all the panels on the comics. In the Sunbow series, we know the name of the computer inside the Ark is called Teletran 1, voiced by Casey Kasem. But in the comics, there is no name. Instead, it's referred to as a drone. Now, isn't it amazing that today we have drones that do exactly what this is doing? The drone explores this new land, new world, gathering data and schematics for inorganic things. Now, in the comics, both factions get repaired at the same time. The crash damaged the Ark's means to identify friend versus foe. Now, in the Sunbow cartoon, the eruption actually awakens Thundercracker first, who quickly revives Megatron and the rest of the Decepticons. Upon leaving, Starscream decides to blast the side of the mountain, and as a result, an avalanche occurs and revives Optimus Prime, the other Autobots. Starscream, what a dumbass. Now, here's something important. Now, remember when Diaclone and Micronauts came over to the US? It wasn't like these are the good guys and they are the bad guys. It was up to Marvel and Hasbro to distinguish what is what. But in the comics, it was the Ark that kind of repurposed the Autobots to resemble earthly vehicles and the Decepticons to resemble earthly weapons and communication devices. And just like in the GIJoe comics, each character loudly gives out their name and what they're all about. Just like speed dating. Of course, the purpose is to sell those toys. Afterwards, Megatron and Decepticons decide that, it would be best if they just hightail out of there because there are fewer numbers and they already are low in energy. It's best to explore this land and continue their fight with the Autobots later. And now it's our heroic Autobots' turn for their roll call. Now what's cool is that how toy accurate everyone's depiction is. Heck, look at good old Ironhide and Ratchet. Now remember, all Jim Shooter and Bob Budiansky had was the actual toys from Japan to create all of this. And so Sunbow was in development at the time and was going to come probably 2 years later after this first issue. The original 18 members of the Ark. It's so cool to look at these panels and how each of these characters has grown through the years, each one with their own unique fan bases and lore. The OGs will always have a special place in my heart, and I'm sure it's the same with a lot of fellow Gen Xers. Optimus addresses the entire team, stating that there might not be a Cybertron, and also the reason why he selected this planet a millennia ago was the fact that there wasn't much life. So he's shocked and terrified that now he has to protect this planet and the life that is on it. Alrighty, so now we move on to introduce the human protagonist in our story, as well as introduce another major difference between the comics and cartoon. We see a call out to Buster. Now, while the father is still known as Sparkplug with Wiki, the son is called Buster, not Spike. And while with Spike we had him kind of following in his father's footsteps, well, Buster is completely different. He's into his books, studying. He has no interest in mechanical stuff. And also, Sparkplug and Spike were on an oil platform, and in this story, he's actually a mechanic, which could be useful down the road. Sparkplug is worried about Buster. He's a bookworm and encourages him to put down the books and go explore the real world. Not all the answers can be found in a textbook. That's quite true. Meanwhile, Optimus has dispatched some of the Autobots to go explore this new world and gather intel. As you can imagine, they are really enjoying their new alt modes, just burning tires and going in crazy speeds. Now, what's cool is we also see some of the same characteristics from Sunbow for some notable characters, like Cliffjumper and Brawn are eager to go into a fight, while Prowl, who is the second in command, not Jazz, like in the Sunbow cartoon, is level-headed and proper. Their quest, as funny as it sounds, is to make contact with the Earthlings. Now, their sensors take them to a place where we Earthlings call a town. Unknowing to them, Laserbeak, who also talks, is trailing them. He tells Megatron of their presumed plan, and as a response, Megatron orders a full-scale assault on the Autobots to stop them from a possible alliance with the humans. Bumblebee grows impatient and overzealous. He wants to be the first to say hello to a human, and he sure does, ramming himself into the back of Buster's car while he was in the middle of making out with his girlfriend. So Bumblebee's first act was to cock-block Buster. Wow. Now, what we eventually will know as the Stakers, following Megatron's orders, tracked down our Autobots and began their assault. Keep in mind that they're in a drive-through movie complex filled with innocent yet horny teenagers. The Autobots have little choice but to reveal themselves in order to defend the humans. So the Autobots are wondering why the Earthlings' vehicles do not transform and defend themselves and the humans. We know the reason to that. We also see the first traces of Starscream's defiance of Megatron, and his desire for leadership is displayed as he questions this frontal assault that they're conducting. Now, what's funny is reading the dialogue, between the combatants. It's like, oh, my weapon is going to do this to you. And then when it happens, the person or the bad guy is like, oh my gosh, your null ray is destroying my optic sensor or something. So it's spelling out everything for you, so nothing is out of the question. Now, during the battle, Bumblebee was severely damaged. He is unable to transform. Buster notices the car is quote-unquote crying, as if in pain. He climbs in the car, and Bumblebee drives him home. Buster cannot believe what he is experiencing. Sparkplug wakes up to all kinds of banging and noise coming from his shop, only to discover Buster. And he's not even upset. He's actually delighted that his son is following in his footsteps and doing something besides reading books. Buster tries to explain what's going on, and when suddenly Bumblebee blurs out, "Help me, I'm dying." And that leads us to issue number 2. Wow! So now we see some elements from the recent Bumblebee movie being incorporated and was taken from this storyline. And again, this was supposed to be just a 4-issue run, but it was so successful that starting with the iconic this issue right here, which is just beautiful in itself. I mean, I got this one graded just because of the artwork in itself. But then it just started growing and turning into the Transformers we love and see today. Well, that does it with this episode of Codename New to Vero 2. Thank you for watching and enjoying this recap. We'll see you in the next episode. Have a nice day.